Hey team, in this module we're going to be discussing conceptual hierarchies. So we're going to take a bit of time to talk about what they are and how they help you in your business, and then later on in this module we're actually going to go through a couple of examples so you can use them to help develop your own or use them with your own clients. So let's start out by thinking, what is a conceptual hierarchy? Well, from an education point of view, a conceptual hierarchy is taking a concept or a topic and breaking it down. And as the name suggests with hierarchy, it's into some sort of logical order of importance or sequence. So it might be ranging from easy concepts to harder, more complex concepts, or reverse. From a cognition point of view though, it's about how the brain processes the information. It's how it associates the new information to past information. So an easy way to think of it is it's kind of looking for patterns. So if we can use patterns in the delivery of our speeches or delivery of our stories when we're giving advice, then it's going to make it easier for people to deal and to remember and to comprehend. Now, here's the big advantage of a conceptual hierarchy for you as an advisor. First up, it puts the focus on you and making sure that people actually comprehend the message rather than simply receive it. So to begin with, it combines both the design and the delivery aspects of what you do as an advisor. So taking time to think about the logical order that you're going to put the information through to your client is a huge win for you. But the other key advantage for you is it allows you to replicate your thinking. So what you'll find is, for example, if I followed you around over a series of a week, for example, of meetings that you're having with clients, if I tape recorded each of those meetings, you'd probably find that there's certain parts of what you run, or certain patterns, if you like, that would come up quite consistently. Now, you might think, no, every meeting I talk about is completely different, but there'll be little sequences of how you message information that would run the same. So developing a conceptual hierarchy is really thinking in advance about the most common topics that you talk about and packaging them and putting a bit more polish on them. The advantage of this is that it allows you to position better in the mind of the client. So as they receive the information, first of all, the conceptual hierarchy kind of signals to the brain that, hey, something important is coming up, I need to pay attention to this. It therefore makes your message more memorable, and by association it makes you more memorable. So in terms of being able to be referred to other people or to be positioned for greater or more complex levels of work or more expensive nature of work, these conceptual hierarchies can go a long way to help you position in that area. So let's take a quick review on what we've covered so far on a couple of slide sheets so that we're really clear on what is a conceptual hierarchy and why we should use them. And then afterwards we'll get started on some examples for you. So just recapping again, what is a conceptual hierarchy? Well, from an educational term, it's the breaking down of the topic or a concept into levels of complexity with some type of logical order or sequence to it. From a brain processing point of view or from a cognition point of view, it's about how the brain processes the new information based on the recognition and association of past information. So the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words, is one way to think of a conceptual hierarchy. It's how you utilize multiple pieces of information, whether it be from a visual or an auditory perspective, so that when the information's passed to the client, it allows them to trap the information with greater efficiency. What are the advantages to you as an advisor of using conceptual hierarchies? First up, they allow you to replicate your thinking. Second, they make your message more memorable. By association then, it makes you more memorable. It helps you to position better. Welcome back. So the two main conceptual hierarchy styles is that of auditory and visual. So in this module, we're only going to discuss the auditory style. We'll pick up the visual in the next module. One of my favorite auditory conceptual hierarchies is a model that I use when I'm going into professional services firms. But it's also extremely useful in any other business that you're going to walk into. And the model is like this: capacity, capability, opportunity. So capacity, I'm looking at the business's volume or transactional volume ability. So if a business says they want to grow, I'm looking to see how much they could literally lift in terms of their overall transactional volume. Capability is I'm looking at skill sets and resource. Do they actually have the people? Do they have the money? Have they got the tools to be able to grow in the direction that they want to grow? And then opportunity is there market demand for what they're going after? Through existing clients or through new clients, is what are they thinking of growing? Is there a demand for it? So capacity, capability, opportunity. When you use this framework with a client, what happens is just because of the rhyming, their brain notices, wow, that's a bit different, I should pay attention. So they start to tune in a bit better. But one of the ways that you could make it even better is by actually physically anchoring it. So as you reveal this model, you might use something like capacity, capability, opportunity. So use your fingers to highlight that there's different points, and then as you anchor on them, so if I've gone capacity on the top, capability in the middle, opportunity on the bottom, each time my finger touches that finger, it helps me and for them to remember which part of the model we're talking about. So let me give you a practical example of how I used this with a mainstream business. And so you can start to see how as a story it could start to be revealed. So many years ago, I was asked by an accounting firm to go and have a look at a business. It was a furniture manufacturing business, and they were considering bringing in a salesperson. So I went into the business with the accountant, met the business owner. We went upstairs. Just before the owner was about to kick off, I said, look, do you mind if we have a look around? Can we have a look around the business to start off with? So if you don't already do that, that's something I definitely recommend you do. Make sure that you have a walk around wherever possible with business owners, because it shifts the physical arena of discussion and gives you more permission boundary in terms of the things that you can ask questions about. You can ask silly questions like, what does that do, or where does that go? And it's in context, it all fits. So we walked around his business, and instantly in my mind I'm thinking capacity to grow, capability to grow, and the opportunity in the market to grow. So first thing from a capacity point of view is I was looking for physically, what was their actual work environment like? What was it from a supply chain, from a storage, from a manufacturer, how it was stored before it was sent out to the retail, assembled, all that kind of thing. So as I walked around the workshop, I noticed a CNC machine, and I asked the business owner, that looks like a pretty expensive piece of kit. And he said, yes, it is. And I said, how many people know how to use that machine? He said, well, myself and 2 others. So instantly I'm thinking, okay, from a risk perspective, he's balanced it, but from a capability point of view, you haven't got a bottleneck. So that's a good thing. As I looked around, I noticed that their area for storage for timber supplies was quite small. So I said to him, are you using a just-in-time style inventory system? And he said, well, not strictly speaking, it's just that our suppliers are very close and we tend to get what we need quite quickly. We don't have to keep too much for ourselves. So that's great. Then I looked at it and said, okay, so when we looked at the work environment, obviously in woodwork there was a lot of dust and debris. So then I looked at the other section of the building where it was put aside for assembly. And I asked him, okay, so how many people can work in this area? And he said, yeah, it is a bit cramped. We are limited to the number of people we can put in here. We then went upstairs into a loft, and that's where the stuff was stored before it got shipped out. So again, I could see quite a limitation of space. So instantly I'm thinking to myself, from a capacity point of view, it didn't look like his physical environment could allow for a massive rate of growth. So if you're going to bring a salesperson on, you get a good salesperson, you're going to pay them at least $100,000. Then you've got car and travel and everything on top of that. So depending on your general margin, you might be having to look at a turnover increase of maybe $500,000 or more before this person's really contributed to the bottom line. So I said to the business owner, okay, from a capacity point of view, and I let him know the framework. And this is the other key thing about a conceptual hierarchy. It's important that you illustrate it or make it visible to the client. It's going to be far easier for them to latch onto it if they know the framework they're following. So I said to him, right, I break a business down, I look at capacity, capability, and opportunity. From a capacity point of view, it looks like you're physically stretched. is there another work environment, or do you have, space next door or storage space next, that I don't know about or I can't see? He said, no, what you see is what you get. So instantly in my mind, I'm thinking his physical capacity, his throughput of transaction is limited. So I asked him, how are you going at the moment with getting work out? And he said to me, well, I'm 6 weeks behind on my orders as we stand here today. So right, he's looking to grow, which is why I wanted to bring a salesperson on, but he's already 6 weeks behind on the orders he's got. So you can only imagine the problem that would come if he did have a successful salesperson bringing even more work in. From a capability point of view, I wanted to look at the nature of the furniture that he developed. So I asked him, do you tend to build bespoke furniture, or do you tend to do more jig work, more runs on a mass sort of production style? And he said, well, we can do a bit of both depending on the orders and the lead-in time, but generally speaking we tend to stick to 5 or 6 sort of key lines that work well. The next key point of the framework that was most critical was I talked about opportunity, and I asked him, how was the furniture retail market going at that time? And by the way, this is some years ago. And he said at that time, look, it's a little sluggish, but we are still moving some stock, and obviously that's why we're behind on orders. So I said to him, when was the last time you went out to your own clients and just asked them what it is that they're getting orders for that you're not able to meet? Or is there any particular type of furniture that people would really love to receive? And what I learned was that really, in many cases with his existing clients, he hadn't seen some of them for over 12 months, and he'd kind of seen his favourites 6 months ago. And in his own words, it was because he was too busy in the workshop. So, that's enough of that story for the moment. All I'm giving you is a practical example of how capacity, capability, opportunity as a framework could be utilised. So in my mind, it allowed me to go in and break down what it is that they're trying to achieve, and if he did want to grow, what were going to be the logistical, legitimate constraints. So what are the issues? I guess I like to use this sort of saying, remove the blockage, don't increase the pressure. So I'm trying to look for the legitimate constraints, and in his business, also the logistical issues of physically moving the stuff around. So by making that hierarchy evident to him and discussing it and using that framework, he was able to see that I thought going and investing in a full-on salesperson at this stage wouldn't be his best use of money. Instead, he'd be better to go and contact some of his existing clients, do a survey, get some information from them face to face and find out if he's meeting their needs properly, because physically, if he was going to try and grow significantly, there was going to be a lot of extra cost because he physically didn't have the environment to do that. So there you go. There's one auditory example. We're just now going to go and do a quick review slide on the key points that came out from that story and that example. Okay, so let's review that example. When we talked about capacity, we're talking about transactional volume. We're looking at things like physical environment, numbers of people, how much actual increase in transactions could a business increase by. So if somebody wants to grow their business, do they physically have the room and the people to undertake the extra transactions? The next key point was capability. So there, we're looking at skills and resource. We're looking at their ability to actually do more. So for example, if a business wanted to get into more bespoke work or more complex work, higher value work, do the skill sets exist within the business for people to actually be able to go and deliver on it? And lastly, we're talking about opportunity. And there we're really focusing on market demand. Has there been or is there signs from existing clients? Is there an opportunity with new clients for the growth? Will the market absorb the increase in output that the business is hoping to grow by? That's capacity, capability, and opportunity. The next conceptual hierarchy that I want to talk to you about is another auditory that I use, and this is probably one of my favorites. So it's very short, very sharp. You can use it in a selling situation, you can use it to position strategic work, or you can use it in the middle of strategic delivery. So it's a good way to help people sort of get some focus back around why they're doing certain behaviors. So here it is. There's 3 reasons why people go into business: time, control, and money. And normally what happens is a business takes control of the business owner, sucks up all their free time and spits out no money. If you want to get control over your business, if you want to be able to have more free time, if you want more money, then you've got to learn to control the things over which you can control. So that means getting a plan, getting some structure, and starting to put in place the things that you need to do in some type of order. That's the only way that you're going to get the free time that you want with your family and the extra income in the bank account. So, just recapping for you there, time, control, money. All right, so remember, it's not just the words that you use, but the rhythm that you throw it around. So it's the pacing. You don't want to leave too much of what we might call a dead spot. If you said, for example, there's 3 reasons people go into business: time, control, money, and you just left it flat, that time, control, money is not going to stick with them at all. So you've got to launch straight back into the story. So as people hear the words and then you use them again, they'll make the connection. 3 reasons why people go into business: time, control, money. Normally what happens, business takes control of the person, sucks up all their free time, spits out no money. Okay, you've heard it before. So as I said, really useful if you're trying to position strategic services, really useful when you're going in as a conceptual hierarchy for you to try and figure out what would motivate a business owner to want to deal with you more. So you might look around and find out, for example, that the business is doing very well financially. And therefore, on the face of it, you might think that they don't have a need for your service. But remember, there'll be something about the elements of free time, and there'll be something about the elements of control. Now, control could take into account the level of understanding or information, but it's probably more likely to relate to the level of certainty that they have, the degree or level of certainty that they have about what's going to happen in the future. That's what we can talk about with control. So it's quite a powerful emotional driver. Obviously, money is about security. It's about making sure that there's levels of reward there also. It's also about contribution. And the free time is just to be able to have that state of mind. We often associate the fact that we're busy with being stressed, whereas in point of fact, we can often be very happily busy doing a task. So what we're talking about when we say time, control, money, if we dig a little deeper, is we're actually talking about issues of certainty, security, and we're talking about having a clean state of mind. So depending on how well you've connected with the person, you can bring those elements back in. So let's just quickly recap what we're talking about when we're using time, control, money. So let's just recap the underlying drivers that we talked about when we mentioned time, control, money. So in relation to time, the underlying driver there was the hope for a relaxed mental state. The underlying driver for control is around certainty or predictability. And the underlying driver for money is about security and reward. The hierarchy again, time, control, money. The last conceptual hierarchy example that I want to use today is one that I've used in probably more strategic work. So it could be around, for example, putting together a share transfer agreement, or it could be in relation to actually getting clients on board to do some strategic planning. So normally I might roll this one out if you had, for example, a couple of business owners that might say, oh look, strategic planning, it's all gobbledygook, or we've tried that and it doesn't work for us, or whatever. So here's the hierarchy, okay? So in response to a bit of feedback like that, or in response to the topic of trying to put together a share transfer agreement or a partner's agreement or a buy-sell, call them what you like, I would use something like this. So I understand your issues in relation to planning, but actually what we're talking about is the communication of expectations with documentation, okay? So all we're going to do is take some time to define what our expectations are. You can't communicate to somebody what it is that you want if you've never thought about it. So the first step is we will define the expectations. We then communicate them to each other. Now, what I expect and what I get is often 2 different things, but at least it's a place for us to start. And once we've communicated it, all we're going to do is document it, so that we've got something to go back on later. Now, how we document, where we document is up to you. The plan could look like a written document, it could be on the back of a napkin if that's how you want it, or it could be in the form of a drawing. But what we're doing as a process is we're taking the definition or the defining of expectations, then we're just communicating them to each other so we're all up on board, and then we're documenting it. So it's the communication of expectation with documentation. Right, let's review that hierarchy together. So let's talk about the supporting information for that hierarchy. When we're talking about communication, we're talking about getting your message across. When we're talking about expectation, we're discussing knowing what you want. And when we're talking about documentation, we're focusing on recording it for future reference. Now, obviously, all of this starts by defining what you want for yourself as an individual before you share it with others. So that's communication of expectations with documentation. So we've discussed 3 different types of conceptual hierarchy in an auditory style. The first one, remember, capacity, capability, opportunity. The next one was time, control, money. And the last one was the communication of expectation with documentation. So how do you build them for yourself? So my recommendation here would be just look at the common problems that you find clients dealing with, look at the type of language that they use, or look at the kind of responses that you find you're already using for people. I personally find driving around in the car and rolling things out, you need to say things out loud. So that's a great thing with the windows up. Nobody knows that you're not on the phone, so it's a great place to practice. But start getting them to flow off your tongue. See how they sound to your own ear. See if they kind of make sense. If you can't remember them from one day to the next, well then no one else is going to. So you'll know it's working when it comes to mind easily for you. I tend to try and make the patterns no more than 3 or 4 components. It makes your brain far easier to remember them, and obviously it's easier for the clients to remember as well. So I guess the focus is focus on the common problems that you find your clients dealing with. Remember the things that you're already discussing on a frequent basis and maybe just put a bit of extra polish around that. The next thing is go and try them on people. As I say, run them through in your own self, so you can hear them, see how they sound, but then go and bounce them off someone. And what you'll find is that quite often they'll add an element to the conversation you've talked about. And you might go away afterwards and think, oh, that sounds pretty good. I might take that and change what I've been doing or add a few pieces. So once you've started to get a couple of ideas together, just get a piece of paper somewhere or set them up on a folder on your computer and just make sure that you start to capture them and use them. But it's kind of like a joke. If you use it quickly, if you tell it to other people, it starts to imprint and you will remember it for years to come. So it's really about finding different areas that you can use them with and just use them with frequency and confidence. So enjoy, have some fun with the auditory hierarchies, and in the next module we're going to be looking at them from a visual point of view. Bye for now.